worst brawler right now is Frank.
Kicking us off is Frank, staying in the F tier.
The 7th tank in today's video is arguably the worst one in the game's history. He's been the worst brawler for, what, 4 years now?
Frank is getting a much needed change to his skill set. The lower his health is, the higher his attack speed.
We ain't done yet.
Frank's super now affects the entire area around him. No more aiming required.
Frank has been through a lot over the history of Brawl Stars. Luckily for all Frank mains, he's finally getting some love and attention in the most recent update. He got a rework on his kit and a really fun hypercharge. This led to a lot of people playing Frank, and it makes me so happy because as a Frank main myself who has been playing Frank before global launch, it's just really awesome to see everyone playing your main. But with the new wave of Frank mains, it got me thinking to myself, was Frank really that bad? Like, I know he was bad, but for me, he was just my bread and butter. But for the meta of Brawl Stars and for everyone else, how was he? To answer this question, we must go back to May 21st, 2018, where Frank was introduced into Brawl Stars. Frank is a very interesting brawler because he was and still is the only brawler that stops moving while attacking. This means that any character that has the ability to knock back an enemy can reset Frank and take him out of his super. However, the big trade-off was crazy amount of damage per shot, and thanks to his star power, Power Grab, it allows Frank to get an additional 30% damage for 10 seconds by picking up a defeated brawler soul. You add this with his super, where it can stun and destroy buildings in a large area. A good Frank player can do some real damage. Still, even if Frank has this crazy attack potential, his slow attack speed was such a major problem because brawlers can get out of Frank's range and do some chip damage, or a brawler like Shelly can just say screw it and shoot him down. And with Cole and Rico dominating the meta during this time, Frank players were having so much fun. So because of this issue, on June 19th, 2018, Frank was given a health buff from 5,600 HP to 5,800 HP. And his main attack range was increased from 5 tiles to 5.67 tiles. These buffs allowed Frank to take more damage and allowed for his attacks to land a bit more consistently. And during this time, the Caveman Frank skin was added to the game. And let's just say the remake still sucks. Even with all these buffs, Frank still struggled. So Supercell decided to buff his main attack range again, increasing it from 5.67 tiles to 6.33 tiles. And his super range was also increased from 6.67 tiles to 7.33 tiles. And I argue that this was Frank's peak. With Cole and Rico getting nerfs, Frank had an easier time. With good damage and good range, Frank was truly a monster. This fame and glory wouldn't last long because a month later, Frank received 2 nerfs on both of his attack ranges, causing him to fall from the top back to the bottom. He was still good. He would be a character that is map dependent and only a really good player can use him at his fullest potential. But then Brawl Stars decided to release one of the most broken characters in history.
We have a brand new legendary brawler joining the game, and his name is Leon.
On release, Leon was one of the most broken characters that Brawl Stars has ever introduced, because not only did he do so much damage up close, his super allows him to be invisible and you just couldn't see him until he was right next to you. This made Leon Frank's worst nightmare. And there was no real counterplay up against a Leon if you played Frank due to his slow attack speed. To add salt into the wound, Frank's star power was given a rework where instead of picking up the skulls of defeated enemies, it now instantly gives Frank the damage boost. This sounds like a buff, but this change hurts his ability in a team battle because now you wouldn't benefit when your teammates get an elimination. Even after Leon's nerfs, most people got a sense on how Frank works and how easy it was to counter him. It also didn't help that Brawl Stars kept on introducing new characters that can just easily counter Frank, like Jean, Carl, Rosa, and Bibi. All of these characters had an ability that can just counter Frank, either through resetting him, having the speed advantage, or just pure tankiness. Frank was indirectly nerfed when these new brawlers were introduced into the game. The next major buff Frank received was on June 11th, 2019, where Frank's star power damage was increased to 50%. And now the length of the star power was also increased from 10 seconds to 12 seconds. These changes were heavily needed. It may have not boosted Frank into the main meta, but a buff is a buff. But what was more interesting than these buffs was the introduction of a second star power for each character. This update had the potential to make an F tier character skyrocket to an S tier. And some of these second star powers were interesting, like Nita's second star power, Hyper Bear, where her bear attack speed was 50% faster. Or how about Carl's second star power, where when he supers, all damage he received is reduced by 30%. With other cool and interesting ideas for these second star powers, Frank mains are just hoping that his second star power can fix at least some of the issues that he's having. Like what if when he supers, he can't be knocked back? Either way, Frank mains didn't have to wait long because on July 17th, 2019, his star power, Sponge, was added into the game. This star power gave Frank an additional 1000 HP. Wait, that's it? That's a lazy star power. I can see the benefits of being more tanky, but Frank was already a character that a lot of brawlers target because it was just so easy to farm supers off of Frank. And this problem got worse when Supercell buffed the Sponge star power. In my opinion, his other star power is a lot more useful because once you do get that first elimination, for the next 12 seconds, people are scared of you. This Sponge star power was just disappointing. But hey, at least we got DJ Frank added into the game. With more characters added into the game that have abilities to get up close or zone out Frank, it looks like Frank was at his worst. And the only real thing Frank received was another health buff from 5,800 HP to 6,100 HP. In the end, these health buffs didn't really matter when a certain brawler was entering the game.
Let's talk about the brawlers. First and foremost, we've got B.
Yeah, as a Frank main, heck, as a tank main, I hate B because she has the mechanics to punish slow moving brawlers due to her second shot being able to do an additional 150% more damage as long as your first shot landed before. Plus, with her super being able to slow down the enemy, if any tank players got hit by that super, we just start praying. After the whole B era, Frank received another health buff from 6,100 HP to 6,400 HP. But what's more interesting was the introduction of gadgets. These gadgets allowed the character to do a unique ability. However, the gadget is limited per battle. Like the second star power, his gadget can be something that Frank desperately needs. His gadget, Noise Cancelling, was introduced on March 17th, 2020, where it allowed Frank to be cleared from any negative effects. This includes stuns, slowing effects, and knockbacks. This was something that Frank heavily needed because it eliminated one of the major problems that Frank had, which was being stunned or knocked out of his attacks. The only real issue was that you're only allowed to use this gadget 3 times per match, and with Brawl Stars being mostly a 3v3 type game, you would have to use this gadget at the right time, and if you didn't, you wouldn't bring any value for your team. Basically, you needed to get the timing right on your gadget in order to get value off of Frank. However, even though this gadget got rid of one of Frank's major problems, his situation didn't get any better. This is due to the fact that other brawlers got gadgets that has the ability to help defeat Frank. Like Shelly's fast forward gadget, where it gave Shelly the ability to dash. This allows her to have more pressure towards Frank or just to simply get away from his attacks. We also have M's personal space gadget, where it allows her to push the enemies away from her while dealing 500 points of damage. And with her always zoning out Frank, it was kind of impossible to defeat M's as a Frank main. Yes, Frank's gadget allows for counterplay against any knockbacks, but with other gadgets introduced, it also brought more opportunities to counter Frank. I think the introductions of gadgets were the final nail in the coffin for Frank. It also didn't help that his gadget duration was nerfed from 2 seconds to 1.5 seconds. And another brawler that was introduced named Jackie can just easily counter him as well. Frank wouldn't get any buffs or nerfs until the end of the year. The only 2 things that happened with Frank was a bug fix that stopped him from kicking the ball in Brawl while using a super, and his true silver and gold skins were added, which in my opinion, these skins suck. They just do. Then when he did get a buff, it was just another increase in health where it went from 6,400 HP to 7,000 HP. Which now it's kind of getting crazy. Still, Frank was considered an F tier character, and other brawlers were announced that can just simply counter Frank. If it sounds like I'm repeating myself, it's because I am, really. Frank was so bad that any new characters that were added into Brawl Stars was just another straight up nerf for Frank. Luckily though, Brawl Stars did throw us a bone by releasing the holiday party skin, and I say I like this skin. The next major change Frank got was on February 26, 2021, where he received his second gadget named Irresistible Attraction. When Frank hits an enemy, it will drag them towards him. This sounds really good on paper, and it is. It's very useful, especially with a team setting, because having a mini Gene Super on your side can provide good benefits during a match, like stopping someone in Brawl Ball or Gem Grab. But if you use this in a 1v1 situation where the enemy is ready, it can really backfire. Something I find interesting though is that during this time, you would want to play Frank as an assassin instead of a tank, because it was just so easy to take out a Frank by tiptoeing around his attacks. However, with the element of surprise and now his monstrous health, a good Frank can generally surprise you. This assassin playstyle got more usage when Frank got a damage buff where both his normal attack and super attack was increased from 1200 damage to 1040 damage. Then after this, Frank was given an interesting buff on June 16th, 2021, where Frank gained a trait where he can now charge his super by receiving damage. This honestly was probably one of the biggest buffs Frank received, because if you played Frank, you will quickly realize how much damage you'll be taking, and having an ability that benefits you by taking the damage as a tank just felt right. Sadly, Brawl Stars nerfed this ability a day later, where instead of 30% supercharge, it will now be a 20% supercharge for his trait. Frank was also given some visual changes on his attacks with certain skins, and what's more interesting is that his supercharge rate from his trait is now based on Frank's max health. Then, 2 months later, both of Frank's gadget were given a buff. His noise cancellation gadget now bypasses El Primo's Cellplex gadget. Then, his irresistible attraction gadget now made Frank's next attack deal double the damage. This buff further improves the assassin-like playstyle Frank mains have been developing. With all of these changes for Frank, it's kind of crazy to think that Frank's best game mode is Solo Showdown, where you can just wait until you catch someone off guard. What's even better is that gears were introduced into the game as well. These gears gives a specific buff, like gaining a shield, more damage under HP condition, and health regeneration of 100 HP per second if you didn't move. The best gear to use back then for Frank was either the health gear, resistant gear, or my personal favorite gear, the damage one, because it stacks with both Frank's gadget and his star power. With all these buffs, was Frank finally a meta character again? No, not even close. Frank had this burst potential, but besides that, he was just a sitting duck that was used to farm supers. The next buff that Frank received wouldn't come out for another 2 years, but in between that time, the Spirit Knight Frank skin was added. Until this day, this is the best Frank skin. Until they released the King Frank skin. Like, come on, Supercell, what are you doing? I'm waiting, I have the money. Also around this time, all brawlers' health and damage were increased from 5% to 10% with each power level. Then finally, the buff that Frank received was another health buff on his sponge star power, where instead of getting 1100 HP, he would now be getting 1260 HP. That means at max level, Frank can have a total of 15,400 HP without the shield gear being activated. This makes Frank the tankiest brawler in all of Brawl Stars by a large margin. With all these changes and other brawlers being added to the game, Frank was still considered the worst character in the game, because no matter how much damage he does, there's just so many abilities that can just simply counter him. Frank was just considered the worst brawler. This also got worse for Frank when Brawl Stars started to add hypercharges into the game, which heavily buffed character stats and their super. And of course, one of Frank's main counters, Shelly, got a hypercharge. Even after years of being F tier, why do people still play Frank? Well, it's because some people find it fun having the odds stacked against you. As I mentioned before, Frank was my bread and butter. I knew he sucked, but I kept on playing him because that dopamine rush when you were able to clutch up a fight is insane. Like, look at this! Yeah, I know most of my matches won't end up like this. In fact, this is how most of my matches go. Like, yeah, what the heck? What am I supposed to do right here? But either way, I love playing him. I knew my place in this world as a Frank main, and I was content. Well, until we got news that Frank was getting a rework. And in one of the Brawl talks, it was shown that Frank was getting his own hypercharge. Then, in the most recent Brawl talk, it was announced that Frank's delay attacks will decrease whenever his health gets low, and his hypercharge will be giving him the ability to super in a 360 radius. When his hypercharge is activated, he will also be given a 26% increase in speed, a 5% increase of damage, and a 25% increase in shield. And also, the Van Ara Frank skin was added and the Caveman Frank skin was remodeled. But who cares about that? Because these Frank changes sound so cool and so interesting. So finally, after all these years, is Frank considered a top tier brawler now?
4 takedowns left. Double takedown.
Yeah, he is. This rework makes you feel like a true monster because of his faster attack speed. Most often than not, he can just eliminate a brawler from the face of the planet. This rework also allows for his noise cancellation gadget to get some playtime because with his hypercharge, you can really just activate the gadget and just go up to the middle of the stage and just super. This truly is the season of Frank. He can be used in most game modes. He is powerful and he is strong. However, I think Frank is a bit too powerful. After testing out Frank in multiple matches, the main issue I see with him is that it can really counter up close brawlers. And you might be thinking to yourself, isn't that good? Because he wasn't able to do that before, but Frank just does it a little too good. Just look at this clip right here. I didn't deserve to win that fight, but I got it. All those HP buffs made it really difficult to eliminate Frank, especially up close, because once you do get him low enough, he will just launch all 3 attacks at you and just eliminate you from the face of the earth. I personally think Frank needs a health nerf or a damage nerf in order for him to be a bit more punishable for close range brawlers. Luckily though, on July 1st, 2024, his speed boost was decreased, so he would have just launched all 3 attacks instantly anymore. He's still pretty strong, but I think it's fine keeping him like that just for a little bit because he might never be this good again. Let the OG Frank mains have fun, even for a little bit. Either way, I'm just enjoying playing Frank right now. And I'll keep on playing Frank even after they nerf him because he's just so much fun to play. So if you haven't given Frank a try, go do it. Destroy your enemies and show who truly is the monster in this game. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, Dim-Witted Gamer here. I just want to say, if you haven't subscribed, you should, if you really want more fun content like this. I also want to say, you should go check out the other Brawl Stars YouTubers like K-Rose Gaming, Lex, Crying Man, and others. Because as you can tell, I used some of their gameplay in this video, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be able to make this video possible. So go show them some love. And finally, I want to shout out Nick Spectre 19 for the thumbnail of this video. Anyways, see you guys next time.